Rand is a man of principle, but also an incredible man of action. It's fun to have them here. And Kelly Paul is here too. Kelly's right over there, and Kelly is kind of a good friend of Abby's and a good friend of mine, and they have 3 big boys, and they're doing well, one in high school, one in the 8th grade, one in college. They're about to become part of the on-the-ground Paul team. But we're lucky to have Rand Paul. He is fighting every day, and he does it in a good spirit. He is not troubled about what he's for because he's comfortable with who he is and what our country needs to be. And there's a difference in somebody who's mad all the time and somebody who's just trying all the time to do the right thing. I believe that Rand Paul is doing everything he can every day to do what he thinks is the right thing. We're lucky to have him here with us tonight. We're lucky to have him as part of our party. We're lucky to have him as one of the great spokesmen for the conservative cause in America, Senator Rand Paul.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank Senator Blunt for that kind introduction, and I will tell you that sometimes it can be a little bit raucous, and sometimes things aren't always everybody getting along. Y'all don't ever have that in the show me state, right? Republicans all get along all the time, right? You all love each other and hold hands. Well, sometimes it's not, but what I can tell you is your Senator Roy Blunt has always made me feel welcome, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I think the battle that he led on religious freedom, on the idea that the government shouldn't be allowed to tell you with your labor that you would have to purchase insurance to insure things that you find morally objectionable. This is about the First Amendment. It has nothing to do with birth control. It is the religious freedom of our country. So the battle he was fighting there that I joined him with, I think is similar to the battle that we're talking about with drones. We're talking about the Bill of Rights. Even though the drones have made it more insidious and we're more concerned because they're more pervasive and they're everywhere, it's really about the Bill of Rights. It isn't just about the technology. The technology makes it worse. I used to say, when I read 1984 when I was a kid, I was like, gosh, this is scary. I hope this would never happen to our country. But I felt somewhat relieved because when I was a kid and read 1984, that technology was unimaginable, that there would be cameras everywhere and they could see your every move, and these cameras would work both ways. We couldn't imagine it, so we felt somewhat comforted, you know, that 1984 was something technologically impossible. But 1984 has come, and it's here now because the technology is available. So our vigilance has to be even greater. That's everybody getting kind of relaxed because I'm just getting warmed up. I've got 13 hours worth of material. I can do that. After the filibuster, we were kind of excited, and my staff was telling me all kinds of things, like 1 million tweets and retweets. I'm not sure what that means, but it sounds like a lot of people are watching. So I went to CPAC the next week, the Conservative Political Action Committee, and I'm giving a speech, and I get started, and I'm going to tell them I got my 13 hours worth of material, and some guy in the audience stands up and says, "Don't drone me, bro." And I said, "You summarized 13 hours in 3 words." That's exactly my point. The other day I was up in New York and driving past the Federal Reserve, and the streets are clogged, there's police everywhere, the sirens are going on, and we got out of the car and said, "What's going on? What happened?" They said, "The Federal Reserve has been robbed." So we went inside, and they had caught the robbers immediately. The robbers were in front of the big safe, but they were flummoxed. They were perplexed. They didn't know what to do with minus $16 trillion. I stole that from Jimmy Kimmel. I'm trying to not steal too many things without giving credit. But there was another Jimmy Kimmel that my middle son Duncan sent to me recently. And kids are persuaded and get their news through short vignettes. We've got to learn that's how the news is going out. Short vignettes, particularly if they're funny. So Jimmy Kimmel's out on the street. He's doing Man on the Street. And he says, "Ma'am, did you realize that the president has pardoned the sequester? And he sent it to Portugal. What do you think?" And the first woman was like, "Well, I really like the president, and he wouldn't send it to Portugal if it wasn't a good place for the sequester." And this went on, and he finally gets to one person, and he says, well, you know, North Korea has been acting so belligerent. You heard the president sent the sequester to North Korea. And they're like, that's exactly right. North Korea deserves it, and if anybody should have that sequester, it's North Korea. A little bit scary when we think these are some of the people who are voting in our election. There was a poll done right after 9/11, and they said, who committed 9/11? Was it Iraq or Iran, or who was it? Over 50% of the people thought Iraq were the people who attacked us on 9/11. That's a confusion that is a problem. We need to know more about what's going on around us. Now, with regard to the sequester, you know, it is disappointing and sad that the self-guided tours have been shut down. But I want to let you know what makes me madder is the same week that the president shuts down the White House, he announces he's got $250 million he found to send to Egypt. He's got F-16s. He's sending F-16s to Egypt, M1 Abrams tanks to Egypt, and he doesn't have enough money to keep the White House open. He doesn't have enough money for air traffic controllers or meat inspectors, but he's got $250 million to send to Egypt. I say, you know what? Not one penny more to these countries that are chanting death to America. John Kerry is watching some of this, because I had him in front of our Foreign Affairs Committee the other day, and I'm asking him questions, and he says very snottily, this is my interpretation, he says, well, people need to quit going around the country and stirring those people up and telling them that foreign aid's bad and getting them all riled up. Maybe a great applause line, but we don't need to be doing that. And so I raised my hand and I said, Secretary Kerry, I'm not stirring the people up. They're already stirred. And it's true. There's not one of you who came here and decided tonight that it was a mistake to send money to countries that hate us. You know that. You instinctively know that. You instinctively know that it's a bad idea to borrow money from China to build roads in Pakistan. You know that. What he doesn't understand, and what many of them fail to understand, is this is where you are. I'm going to where you are because I came from where you are. I'm not making you and trying to create some perception that foreign aid's a bad deal. And so he says it's doing such great things. I raised my hand and I said, well, Mubarak was the head of Egypt. We gave him $60 billion. He and his family are worth somewhere between 10 to 20 billion that we can count. He's got homes in every continent on the world. He was a crook. Regular people in this room paid taxes to go to a rich person in another country who then made the poor people in his country mad. So do you think those poor people that were out protesting, regular people let's call them, in Tahrir Square who were mad at Mubarak because he stole all that money, do you think they're happy with America when they get sprayed with tear gas that was made in Pennsylvania, bought with your tax dollars? No, foreign aid isn't buying their sympathy or their friendship. They're mad more at us because we give it to people who are oppressive to them. So we have to change what we're doing. We're out of money. It's not going to balance the budget. That's the other argument. It's only 1% of the budget. Yes, it's a small amount. It's not going to balance the budget. But you've got to start somewhere. That's right. And the president says, woe is me. Woe is me. The sequester. We can't possibly survive the sequester. Well, I have a couple of suggestions for him before we close the White House. What about the $300,000 we spent on a robotic squirrel last year? Right. Apparently, they wanted to know, some crack scientists with your tax dollars wanted to know, will a rattlesnake strike a squirrel that's not wagging its tail? Now, they couldn't get a live squirrel to volunteer not to wag its tail. So they built a robotic one at $300,000, and guess what? A rattlesnake will bite the you-know-what out of a squirrel that's not wagging its tail. They spent $500,000 developing a menu for Mars. Now, this could be a good thing. If you have a college kid who's living in your basement, who might be your son or daughter, and you're looking for a job for them, it's $5,000 stipend, all expenses paid. The study was in Hawaii. This is a terrible job. There were some requirements for your young man or woman at home you're looking to get a job or government grant. You had to like food. So they sent them out there and they said, what would the menu be on Mars? And so what did a bunch of college kids come up with? Pizza. In the military budget, and this is why we have to look at the military budget also, right. There was $1.8 million in the military budget to develop roll-up beef jerky. There was $5 million in the military budget to study the collective action of fish. I don't know what that means. And I certainly could do it for a lot less than $5 million. We have to look at this. We can't just say every dollar spent on the military is sacred or well spent. Right. Some have said if we would audit the Pentagon, there's $25 billion worth of savings. Tom Coburn, who's one of the best at rooting through the government, looking at waste, he came up with $7 billion that's being spent on research in the military budget that has nothing to do with the military. For goodness sake, these start adding up to real money. If you simply don't rehire people, I suggested this to the president, he went a year and a half with the sequester until he started doing anything. So all of a sudden he's laying off air traffic controllers, but the sequester was voted on a year and a half previously, he did nothing. If you simply do not rehire the people who retire at the end of their service, retire from federal government, don't rehire them, it saves like $9 billion a year. If you were to cut their travel budget, you've heard about them going to Las Vegas and spending $1 million and they have puppets and magicians and belly dancers. If you just cut their travel budget by 25%, that's $2 billion. If you said to the federal government, you have to have competitive contracts, which means, yeah, you'd have to take the cheapest price offered to do a job, which means you wouldn't do prevailing wage and you wouldn't do this Davis-Bacon stuff, that saves $9 to $10 billion. There's $25 billion worth of real estate that is not being used. It's just sitting there vacant. It actually costs money to take care of the $25 billion worth of real estate. There's one the other day, and I don't know if you saw this one, Roy. This was accounts that have zero balance in them. I think there's 800 accounts with zero balance in it. And I forget what it adds up to, but it's like millions of dollars a year maintaining bank accounts with no money in them. I guarantee if you look through item after item, if you had somebody like Tom Coburn and you put them into government and say, go after the waste and start doing it, I give you permission to start cutting, we could cut lots of things without cutting essential services. If you look at the sequester, there's one line going up like this. This is what your government's going to spend with the sequester. This is the other line. You can't even see any white space between the lines. It's a slowdown in the rate of growth. If we can't do this, we're doomed. We have to step up as a country, and the good news is, I think we're winning on this. Public relations is winning. Now, there are perks to sometimes knowing important people in Washington, and the other senator in my state is the minority leader, Senator McConnell. So I got on the Foreign Affairs Committee because I am good friends with Senator McConnell, and I don't want to brag, but. So I'm on the Senate committee, and we get to go through the appointment. So on the way out, guess what? Hillary Clinton stops by. So I couldn't help myself. I said, Secretary Clinton, did you read the cables asking for help, asking for more security? And she said she didn't read them. And so I said, if I had been president, I would have relieved you of your responsibility. And I would go one step further. I think that her dereliction of duty, I don't question her motives, but her dereliction of duty and her lack of leadership should preclude her from ever holding any office. Think about what happened. Think about the sequence of things. In early May, they asked for a DC-3 so they can move people around the country and leave quickly if they have to. Denied. 3 days later, Hillary Clinton's State Department approves $100,000 for electrical charging station at the embassy in Vienna so they can green it up and show off to the Europeans how green we are, because they have all electric cars, but they had to build a brand new electrical charging station for $100,000 while not paying attention to the security needs in Benghazi. So we go through the summer. In the middle of the summer, this came from Tom Coburn also, we find out that they spent another $100,000 sending 3 Indian American comics from the United States to India to promote Americanism, to promote our culture on a make chai, not war tour. Now, I don't care if people want to go, and I'm all for comedy, but I don't think we need to be paying for it when we say we don't have enough money for security. We also discovered that $300,000 was spent on kennels for dogs in Iraq. Now, the dogs are important, but it does sound a little excessive, $300,000 for kennels. We also learned that they spent $80 million on a consulate in Mashar al-Sharif in the northern part of Afghanistan. They signed a 10-year lease, built the building, it's ready to move in, and then someone said, you know what? When you stand in the courtyard and you look up, there are all these balconies all the way around us on other buildings. Couldn't people sit or stand on those balconies and shoot in our courtyard? Oh, guess what? We won't be able to use the building. We just paid $80 million for it. And then she has the gall to say she didn't have time to read the cables. And I'm like, I don't think she can read every cable. Maybe from Estonia and Bulgaria, an assistant should read it. But from one of the 5 most dangerous countries in the world, there's no excuse for her not reading the cables. They did a post-mortem, they did a report on this, and they came up with some good suggestions. But the safety board, or the review board, I think missed one fundamental thing. Libya is not Paris. You don't set up your embassy in Libya the same as you would in Paris. I think Libya is more like Baghdad. In Baghdad, we set up a military perimeter, we have soldiers there, and it's in charge of a military general or colonel who is in charge of that perimeter. Libya is emerging from a war. There's no clear-cut government. The people that were guarding our ambassador are called the February 17th militia. I also wanted to ask her, you only have a limited amount of time, so some of these questions we'll have to forward to her. But I also wanted to ask her, you know, when you travel around, does the February 17th militia guard you? And I said, what about the Marines? And she said, oh, the Marines are to guard the paper. And I said, I know some Marines, and I think they're fully capable of guarding more than paper. Oh, but that's not the rules. Well, if it's not the rules, change the damn rules. Yes. This is not Paris. This is America. We lost the presidential election. I know that's news to you. We lost the previous presidential election. We need to figure out how we become a national party again. We have large pockets of red. Missouri's got large pockets of red, but you're still one of those, you know, battleground states that could go either way. We have to figure out how to be a bigger party. We're a diverse nation, and we're going to have to reach out to diverse groups and say, we welcome you to our party. African Americans, Hispanics, Asian Americans, Indian Americans, we have to do it. When I first ran for office, people, and I'm just a small town physician, never run for office, I said, people come up to me and say, that's Mrs. Smith. You've got to go up and ask her for her vote. I said, that's silly. I'll tell her what I'm for, and she goes home and decides, I'm not going to get right up in her face and say, can I have your vote? But it is kind of true that you have to show up at places. We need to show up in the African American Methodist Church, the African American Social, the Hispanic Family Conference, everywhere. And ask for their vote and say we do care. But we also have to have a message that is better than the other side. Right. So many people have languished, who have been disadvantaged in our country for decade upon decade, and the Democrats are doing nothing for those people. We are the party of mobility. We're the party of upward mobility. We're the party that's going to go into Louisville, where predominantly African American schools have a 40% graduation rate, and we're going to say, your schools suck, and we're going to make them better. Give people choices. Let them go to the same schools that our kids go to, who might live in the suburbs. Give them school choice. Break up this monopoly that says we're not going to change. There's a painter by the name of Robert Henry, and he wrote something that I think really the Republican Party ought to think about. He wrote to painters, he said, paint like a man coming over a hill singing. We need to be the party that proclaims what we stand for like a man coming over a hill singing. I'll give you an example of what I think that is. You ever seen The Sound of Music? The Von Trapp family, Julie Andrews coming over the Alps singing. There needs to be hope and optimism, but we need to be singing about something that people are attracted to. Reagan said, paint in bold colors. I'm not asking you to dilute what we stand for. I'm asking you to present what we stand for in a better way, in a way that appeals to more people. I think if we believe in ourselves, if we believe in what our country stands for, if we believe in the principles that we were founded upon, if we stand up, like standing up on the filibuster, where I stood up for a principle that is the right to trial by jury, you would think everybody would support. I did get support from the right and the left, from young people that aren't attracted to our party, because they saw something that they didn't see as purely partisan. We didn't do a poll and say, oh, the drone issue will get us a lot of votes. In fact, it probably polled negatively in the Republican Party and actually may have shifted some since the filibuster. We got up and did it just because it's what we stand for. There's a young man that lives in the town next to me, Sergeant J.D. Williams, and he lost both legs and one arm in the war. Kelly knows him well, knows his family well, and we helped through a group called helpingahero.org to build a specially adapted house for him, and we're doing this with other veterans. But the thing about it is when you talk to him, he's amazing. One, he says he doesn't think anybody else in his platoon could have withstood the bomb, and he was glad he took it. He's built like a fireplug, just strong as an ox. And he still goes hunting. He grabs the bow with his teeth and holds it with his good arm, and he hunts. He's indefatigable. I mean, he's out there and he seems optimistic, and he's got kids and a wife and a family, and he's not suppressed. But you ask him what he's fighting for, what he went to war for, why he volunteered to defend America. This doesn't have to do with the details of the war. It has to do with why did he volunteer? What does he believe? What is he fighting for? He said he was fighting for our Bill of Rights. He's fighting for the right to trial by jury. He said he doesn't want to come home and see his politicians say, oh, we're now sending Americans to Guantanamo Bay with no charge and no trial. He doesn't want to see the loss of Bill of Rights. That's what he was fighting for. So when we look at this, we have to know what we stand for and fight for. Let's not think about the last election, but think about a man coming over a hill singing. Thank you.